Here we go. It is Saturday morning, which means it is time for yet another episode of Why I Want, the series where we take a look at some of the prospects in the 2023 NHL entry draft. We talk about what they are, we talk about what they could be, and we talk about where they could go in this year's selection of guys. And in today's episode, we're talking about one of the players that is a lot more polarizing than the guys we had talked about before. You see, starting with last episode with Brayden Yager, we've started to adventure into the territory of guys that are not guaranteed to being top picks, but depending on who you ask, this guy potentially should be in that range. Today we're talking about a big right-handed defenseman, and already when I say that, some of y'all's ears are going to be perking up because that tagline is pretty attractive for most folks. Instead of sticking around in the WHL and the CHL like we've done in the past, let's head over all the way to Switzerland as we talk about a guy playing for EHC Kloten. This is Austrian-born defender David Reinbacher. Now, Reinbacher is a really interesting name, mostly because, depending on who you ask, as we had said, some are really high on this guy, others are a little bit lower, and it's all reflected in his player profile. Reinbacher, as we had said, he's a big right-handed guy. He's 6'2", 187 as a defenseman, 18 years old, born on October 25, 2004, from Austria, but he's playing in the top-tier Swiss league. You see, even though he was Austrian-born, he had played the majority of his hockey-playing career in Switzerland, in different versions of U15 team and U17 teams, U20 teams, etc. But last year, he actually got moved up to the main Swiss league, mostly because he was too good for the younger leagues, and even though he was an underage player, he was just so much above and beyond better than everybody that they said, okay, you can play in the main league, you're good enough. As a result, playing for EHC Kloten this season, he's got himself a consolidated ranking of 17th overall, which might make you say, okay, so this guy's probably going to be a mid-first round pick, some team that got eliminated in the playoffs will have an opportunity to get this guy. But if you go over to the individual reports, you can see that there's a lot of diversity in terms of where Reinbacher should go in the minds of the people analyzing the draft. This is because you have outlets like Daily Faceoff having him at number 8th overall. NHL Central Scouting ranked him as the 5th best European skater. Elite Prospects has him at 12, for example. Then you have yourselves a lot more outlets that are lower on him too. McKeen's has him at number 26, Bob McKenzie has him at 20, Craig Button also has him at 36, and you have outlets like Draft Prospects Hockey who have him at 27. Recruit Scouting even has him at number 35, so outside the first round. But when it comes to scouting communities as a whole, the one consensus that I'm seeing across the board is that David Reinbacher is a prospect that is worth your attention. This is because this season, in the top-tier Swiss League, the guy had 22 points in 46 games played, and 2 points in 3 games in the playoffs. Again, he is an 18-year-old big right-handed defenseman, so just going out there and playing in the league in the first place is a pretty good sign. On top of that, actually being able to produce and be given a good role makes him valuable as well. In fact, if you go over to the Swiss League's entire history and you sort by U19 defenders, David Reinbacher was only outscored by one 18-year-old Roman Josi 1 year after Josi was drafted. Now, you have to sort it like this, U19, because Roman Josi was drafted in 2008, and the season he had in 2008 saw him produce a lot fewer points. David Reinbacher was an early birthday in his draft-eligible season, so it's a little bit wonky there. But even still, draft-eligible David Reinbacher was a lot better, points-wise, than draft-eligible Roman Josi was. And draft plus 1 Roman Josi was only just a tad better than Reinbacher this season. And, I mean, Josi got 90-something points last year. He's a pretty good guy. Definitely don't want to make the immediate comparison there, but just kind of throwing out the numbers, showing off who is in the territory of production Reinbacher has accomplished. Now, when it comes to how Reinbacher plays, the little scouting report on My NHL Draft goes out there and highlights it very well. Tony Ferrari said this back on December 19th. The young Austrian can defend the rush fairly well, using his long stick and frame to close out along the boards, but the consistency isn't there quite enough. The projection of Reinbacher's game comes from having faith in his raw tools and skill. Corey Pronman on The Athletic said this: he is a mobile 6'2" right-shot defenseman who can contribute at both ends. Reinbacher's gap control is strong, killing a lot of plays due to his feet and reach even if he's not overly physical. Now, when it comes to the way Reinbacher plays, from these two scouting reports, you can pretty much gather that he is a defensively minded defenseman who's got a pretty strong, capable profile in his own zone. But if you go over to the Elite Prospects video that they made on David Reinbacher from about a week ago, David St. Louis threw out a comparison that I thought was really interesting and quite accurate when you talk about the stylistic play. Not the ceiling necessarily, but just in the ways that these guys play the game. David St. Louis went out there and saw some comparable traits to one MORITZ SEIDER, and there's actually really good video evidence included in the Elite Prospects Guide. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to go ahead and watch their video. It does a really good job at showcasing the footage and highlighting Reinbacher's strengths and weaknesses, but when it comes to how Reinbacher plays, there's some great stylistic comparability between these two guys. Reinbacher is a fluid skater, a great puck handler, and a decent playmaker in the offensive zone too. He can shoot and he can pass well. Even though a lot of these scouting reports talk about how good he is defensively, in the offensive zone, if you watch some of the tape, he is great at making textbook plays consistently. He isn't afraid to go for a skate and dig pucks out of contention as well. He's surprisingly mobile for his size too, especially when he's defending in his own zone. He's great at anticipating defensive plays and breaking up opposing chances, and he isn't afraid to get physical either. Reinbacher can be shifty when he needs to be, especially when he's trying to evade pressure. This works with his ability to build up speed, as he possesses a poise and calmness in how he traverses around the ice with the puck. He isn't ever fazed with what his opponents throw at him. He's very composed and very patient, which bodes well with his offensive potential and size. He got better as the year went on, especially after the World Juniors, and he was able to expand more so on his breakout ability in the second half of the year. This is a player who, after starting out the year somewhere in the mid-first round, maybe second half of the first round on most outlets, has really worked his way up, that some outlets have him even as a top 10 guy. And if you talk to many of those in the scouting community, you'll have the arguments pop up that Reinbacher should be labeled the best defenseman in the 2023 draft. It's just, if you wanted to make the comparison to SEIDER, you've got to get the bad with the good too. The reason SEIDER didn't project to go as high as he did in the draft, now we know Stevie Y took him a lot earlier than people thought he would be taken, was mostly because of what we had seen out of SEIDER in the DEL. He wasn't really given an opportunity to showcase his offensive skills, and was more so told to just play as defensively as he could. There was talent there, we just didn't really see too much out of it. But when it comes to how SEIDER plays the game, the calmness, the smoothness with his skating, the offensive abilities, the defensive capabilities, a lot of what Reinbacher showcases in the Swiss League can be seen in the same light as MORITZ SEIDER's tape back from 2019. It's just Reinbacher in this season's worth of play was given a lot more room to do offensive things and to show off that he had a side to his game that allowed him to produce points, that allowed him to feed off of his teammates, do some nice give-and-go plays, walk in with big bombing one-timers that were low, setting up rebounds, or just shooting it himself when he has the time and space. David Reinbacher was put in a much more favorable position, and as a result, he outscored a guy like Roman Josi when Josi was the same age. Heading into the next few seasons, David Reinbacher is just going to have to improve on his overall maturity, just refine the IQ, especially in his own zone, make sure his man-to-man coverage is a little bit stronger, make sure that he's getting a little bit quicker, a little bit faster, a little bit stronger, because, I mean, the guy is 6'2", 180-something. He's already a pretty big dude as a right-handed defenseman. There's a really strong foundation here when it comes to the profile that Reinbacher already has and what he could potentially be in the future. Even if you're not getting yourselves MORITZ SEIDER 2.0, at the very least, you're getting a top 4 floor type of guy who can play a really solid two-way game, and at his very worst, will probably just be a good physical shutdown D-man in the NHL. However, if you talk about ceiling, you talk about what he could be at his absolute peak, well, he was already a top point producer in the Swiss Junior Leagues when he was as young as 17, 16 years old. So if he's really able to refine that offensive game and keep up with higher levels of play, you could potentially be looking at the next MORITZ SEIDER. It really depends on how he's able to adapt to NHL systems and work his way around those. So at the end of the day, David Reinbacher is a guy who, if he pans out, he could be a legit top 2 minutes-eating defenseman who could maybe put up 40 to 45 points in a season. But if you want to go on the low side, you might be getting yourselves a pretty alright shutdown defenseman either way. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about David Reinbacher and the way that he plays. Do you like the comparison to MORITZ SEIDER? Again, the Elite Prospects video is going to be linked in the description. Go ahead and give that one a watch. But let me know your opinions about this player. If you're a fan of any NHL team, do you want your team to draft this guy? What's the highest you'd be comfortable drafting him? Thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.